G'day. Today we're going to talk about generators. This is the start of my new 2026 Tech Tuesday podcast. I'm going to try and talk about boat equipment, boat issues, and today I want to talk about portable generators. So a lot of us yachties, we have yachts that are a little bit too small or too tight for a traditional inboard saltwater cooled generator. So you only have a couple of choices when you don't have a generator. That is, you charge your batteries off your motor, or you charge your batteries off solar, or you use a combination of solar and motor. Traditionally, people would just use their motor. But the problem is, motors are expensive. Like the average, I just put a new motor in, it's about $20,000 to $30,000 to put a new motor in a 40, 50-foot yacht. Mine's a Yanmar. It's a 4-cylinder Yamaha, 50 horsepower, and it uses between 2.5 to 4 litres an hour, depending on how hard I'm pushing it. Now that's a reasonable amount of money in fuel, depending on where you are. Like you might pay $3 or $4 a litre sometimes up in the islands for fuel. So I try to rely on wind and solar, but you don't always get enough energy out of your wind and solar. Sometimes it's overcast and it's not blowing a decent wind to push your wind generator. And if it's not blowing hard, your wind generator is really not producing very much power. I rely heavily on solar. I think solar's fantastic, but often it's quite overcast up in the Pacific where I'm sailing at the moment. So then I go back to either my motor or generator. So the time when my motor shit itself, my generator also died. And I used to have a 2.5 kilowatt Honda pull start generator, little portable generator. Fantastic generator. I can't say enough about the Honda generators. They are awesome. And mine lasted for about 15 years. And the last 10 years on the back of the yacht, rolling around, covered in seawater, exposed to the elements. And it just worked faithfully until about a year and a half, 2 years ago, up in New Caledonia, massive squall, and it just got soaked. And that ruined the stator, but it was probably already on its way out. It was just the last of a long line of things to happen to it. So it was about $700 to change the stator of a very old rusty generator. So I started looking around, and what I really wanted was a generator that I could start and stop remotely. And in the size I wanted, which is 2.5, there's not a lot of variety. So I did a bit of shopping around, and I eventually found a generator called a GT2500. Reputable brand, they're pretty reliable. A lot of tradesmen use them. 2500 watts, it produces enough power for my needs. So on my boat I have 2 sealed battery chargers. They're 25 amps each, so I'm producing 50 amps off my generator into my batteries when I'm running the battery charger and the alternator together, which is not bad. I could probably actually push that to about 75 amps, I believe, without it impacting the generator too much, but 50 amps is okay. Generally I'm only down about 100 amps, so I run the generator for a couple of hours, and if I need to, and it works quite fine. So I went from owning a Honda, which was getting hard to start, but it still started. You just had to give it a decent belt to get it started, and it's a pull start. And I was finding that my smaller framed female crew found it difficult to start the Honda. A newer one would have been easier, of course, and they are little 4-strokes, so they're generally pretty good engines. And mine had done a lot of hours. I have no idea how many hours, but a lot. I used it for several years before I put it on the boat. And the new GT2500, I felt it was going to be better for my needs, which was being able to just start it from the cockpit or start it from inside the boat. I've got a little key fob which is a Wi-Fi key fob or Bluetooth, and I just press it and the generator starts. Now that's not completely reliable, but it generally works. It always turns it off, but it doesn't always turn it on. So it has a little battery, and the battery will go, probably a little lithium battery, and the battery will go flat if it's not being used readily. So yeah, after about 5 days, it probably loses a bit of charge. But generally, I'm running the generator every couple of days just to top up the batteries when I'm sailing, so I don't have to run the motor. And overall, that generator has been a godsend. I have it on the back of the yacht. It's tied down so it can't move. I heel up to 30 degrees at times, and the generator is still running well at a heel of 30 degrees. It's a little four-stroke. I have a couple of covers that go over the top of it, and that keeps the salt water out of it. It doesn't keep the moisture out of it. But what I did when I first bought that generator was I pulled all the panels off and I sprayed all the electrical components with lanolin and all the aluminium components with lanolin also to try and keep the corrosion down. And that's worked quite successfully. After about a year, it's been pretty good. The only problem I had was after a year, one of the stators had failed. So I had to get a new stator put in, but it's again working well. So not as reliable as a Honda, but still quite reliable. Now that's a question you've got to ask yourself as a cruising sailor, particularly if you buy a boat and it doesn't have a generator. If it's already got a generator, you're likely to keep it running. And why wouldn't you? It's already on the boat. But generators, like engines, take a lot of maintenance. You've got to change the oil regularly. You've got to change the anodes. You've got to keep the water coming into it clean. You've got to keep the air clean. It's a little diesel. If it's on a boat, it needs raw water cooling generally. I haven't seen any air-cooled generators that can fit inside the boat and operate. I've looked myself, and the other downside of a seawater-cooled generator is they're expensive. It's pretty difficult to find a little single pot or two pot generator. That's single cylinder or two cylinder generator for less than about 10 grand. By the time you buy it and fit it, you're up for somewhere around 10 grand. The bonus is they're typically 5 to 10 kilowatts, and if you're going to put one in, you might as well put in a 10 kilowatt, because then you can run things like electric compressors and other tools on that. This is one of the downsides of having a portable generator. So 2.5 is about as big as you want to put on the back of a boat. They're 25 kilos, so they're quite portable. You can lug them around easily enough. I take mine off and put it down inside the boat when I leave the boat for extended periods out of the weather. And they're really easy to maintain. They're just generally little four strokes are quite reliable, but they don't produce as much power as a inboard saltwater cooled generator. 2.5 will not start a scuba compressor. Scuba compressor requires about 6 to 7 kilowatts to boot it over. Now you can get soft starts, and you might be able to get away with a 5 kilowatt. So there's a little soft start, like a couple of capacitors or supercapacitors that help the load that kicks over that compressor. But I tried everything initially to run an electric compressor on my boat using a 2.5, and I just couldn't get it to run. I could run it off shore power, no problems. I just couldn't run it off my compressor. I could have changed it to 3-phase, and I would have had to do a whole pile of things, but then you're starting to get a little bit clever, and clever things on boats generally fail. So I ended up pulling the electric compressor out and putting in a petrol compressor. Now the benefit is it's a little Honda motor, about a 15 horsepower, and when I want to make air for my scuba tanks, it just works. It's always a pitch to start, but it's because you don't use it often enough. But generally, I can kick it over. And if I really need to, I can get a bit of Aerostart or Start Your Bastard, and that'll do the job. So they're just some of the considerations when you're thinking about generators. So, crawling out to the back of your boat to start your generator, because you generally want it on the back of your boat or your sided boat where the fumes are going to be blown away from your crew. Like, the last thing you want is when you're sailing to have the fumes rolling around the back of the boat and coming back into the cockpit. And I do get that from time to time. On my boat, I tend to run a exhaust hose off the generator, and I run that to just above the top of the water line on the stern of the boat, and I find that stops the fumes from being pushed back into the cockpit, because you really don't want exhaust fumes coming into your cockpit, and the last thing you want is exhaust fumes coming into your cockpit when you're on anchor. And generally it doesn't happen because your boat swings around on anchor, so the nose is into the wind most of the time. But sometimes you just get these squirrely winds in different anchorages, and you do end up with fumes. So having a hose or some mechanism of taking exhaust gases away is good. A lot of people put it on the side of their boat so the exhaust gases just get blown away. But I find that if I've got the generator on the side of the boat, it's next to my cabin or next to the galley or the area where most people are spending time if they're downstairs, and it's annoying. So I have it right at the stern. I have it on rubber mounts, and I can actually drop a fabric barrier, which that also reduces the noise of the generator. The noise is not very noticeable. It's probably about 50 to 70 decibels. So it's not too bad, and that's even on full power. If it's just on eco mode, it's probably 50 decibels, and it's quite reasonable. You could be sitting there, and even on early morning shift, and it's not such a problem. And I tend to run it on my shift. Like I do the morning shift, so if the batteries are low, I'll turn the generator on in the morning shift. I'll just put all the hatch boards back in and close the hatch so that the crew don't have to listen to the generator. So it doesn't worry me when I'm sailing if it's running. And occasionally you'll see on my videos I'm running the generator in the morning, and I just forget that it's running, and I'm talking about something that's in the background. But yeah, that's a consideration. If I was going to recommend any generator, like portable 2.5 kilowatt generator, I would recommend the Honda. I would not recommend the 1 kilowatt. I think it's just too small. I've used them for forward driving and camping, and they're fine just for keeping some electrical appliances running, laptops running. They're great. These things will run in 50-degree heat. They use like probably a couple of litres all day, 24 hours. They're using like no fuel at all, so they're real fuel misers, and they're fantastic in that way. And my old Honda, even though it was beaten up, 2.5, still used less fuel than my GT2500. But that's a trade-off. You don't know these things until you actually buy them. And the difference was I bought a GT2500 for $1,300, and I got a discount. I didn't have to pay GST because I was in New Zealand as a foreign yacht. And I did get a discount as well because it was purchased around Christmas time. So it was a really good deal. Like, to buy a Honda was about probably close to $3,000. And I guess time will tell whether if it's a good deal for me or not. I find most cheap generators are shit, and that's why I went for a reputable brand with a lot of tradies using it. And I mean, the thing that was guiding me was I wanted electric start, electric stop. It makes a difference to the female crew. It makes it much easier for them just to turn the generator on. So that was my impetus to buy that generator. If it doesn't work out, like if it doesn't last more than a few years, then I'm going to go back and buy a Honda. And because they're just, they are so goddamn reliable. And if you were going to go out and buy a brand new generator and it wasn't an issue where you're going to put it, and it's just you starting it occasionally, then I would say a pull start Honda 2.5 is the best generator. And even a second hand one, I mean, a second hand one without ridiculous hours on it and no rust, is still a great buy. I looked at a couple of those myself, and but I could still pick up the brand new GT 2500 for less than a second hand Honda. So that's what I went with. And my generator came with a 4-year warranty. So it's hard to pass a 4-year warranty. And I don't just use it for sailing, I use it when I'm land-based, out camping and running around doing things. If I work on the boat and I need to run heavier tools, I'll just run it off the generator. So generators are handy. And a lot of people I see, they're trying to run all solar or run just off the motor. And the problem is, if you're running off the motor, you're putting a lot of hours on your motor. And as I stated before, motors are damn expensive. And the oil changes on your motor are more expensive. So I try to keep my motor just for pushing the boat along, getting in and out of port. I try to use it as little as I can, but I'll still start it every couple of days to keep it ticking over. But I don't want to be running it just for charging batteries. I know everybody's got a different opinion. I could put a much bigger, heavier generator on it, or alternator on it, and that's also a consideration. And then there's solar, and I have 800 watts of solar because I've got a monohull ketch. Now the ketch reduces my solar capacity because I have a mizzen sail, which is covering one side of the solar panels or the other. I typically only get 50% of my cockpit solar array, and I have a couple of smaller solar panels on the deck, and I have a couple on side mount so I can adjust the angle of them depending on where the sun is. And occasionally I can get the two side ones adjusted so they pick up morning or afternoon sun, but I generally only get one of the top solar panels. And I have two 400 watt solar panels, and I'm probably going to add another one. At some stage I'll add davits to the back of the boat, and I'll put another 400 watt solar panel on the davits. I don't think you can have enough solar on a boat. It's a good investment. Solar panels are dirt cheap, but the downside is you just often don't get enough solar energy from the sky for your solar panels. And it's surprisingly in the Pacific, I'm often not generating enough solar energy, and I'm really surprised at how often it's overcast and I'm just not generating that energy. On a good day, my batteries are charged in an hour or two, and I rarely get my batteries less than about 150 amps. I'll pull out. What have I got? I've got about 700 amp battery bank. I have a variety of different batteries, and I'll talk about that at some stage. But I run a combination of lithium and lead acid. So I have starting batteries, and I have house batteries, and there's a bit of a hybrid combination going on in there as well. But my house battery typically doesn't get more than about 150 amps on a 12 volt system, and I can typically charge that up in a reasonably short period of time. But sometimes, if it's overcast, I've got to spend a couple of hours with the generator running, just charging batteries, or if I'm doing a lot of work on the computer, or there's a couple of computers running, charging, camera batteries, and, doing any work with machinery, then, that's when I need a bit more power. And I also have a inverter, so I have a 3500 watt inverter on the boat for running things like, microwave and blender, tools, the Starlink, and that can use a bit of power as well. If I'm running Starlink for an extended period of time, that sucks a bit of power. It's about 45 watts an hour, and probably a little bit more. So power on a boat is certainly one of your biggest considerations, and I quite like having a generator. It is another inconvenience, but I find the little portable generators are quite simple. They're very simple to maintain. Like, mine just runs 1540 oil, same as in the engine. I change it at about 50 hours, although I often forget, and it's probably 100 to 200 hours before I change it. And often the oil is perfect, like there's nothing wrong with it. But I do try and change it regularly. And I change engine oil on the boat probably every 200 hours. So at the very least, at 200 hours, I'll change the generator if I have forgotten to change it while we're out just sailing from country to country. But yeah, that's my take on generators and particularly portable generators. I think if I had an inboard generator that was in good condition, I would try very hard to keep it in good condition. I'd make sure that I check all the anodes. I flushed it with fresh water when I came into port and I wasn't using it, because these things are really expensive to maintain. And the other problem with inboard generators, which I see a lot, is they've been put into the boat before the engine's been put into the boat. And whilst they make room for you to service them, maybe change the oil, change the filters, maybe even get into the anodes, it's almost impossible to get these things out. And quite a few friends have had to cut a hole in the floor to get their generator out because they didn't want to pull the engine out. Because pulling the engine out is quite a big task. So if you have one and you've just bought a boat, I would encourage you to learn how to maintain it. Get it serviced really well. Check all the intercoolers or heat exchangers, and check the anodes if it's got anodes. If it hasn't got anodes, make sure that the coolant is fresh, and maybe change it more regularly than it's recommended. I know, like the heat exchanger on my Yanmar, it doesn't have anodes, which I really don't like. I would prefer to have anodes, and I'm relying on the coolant. So I'm changing the coolant at about half the time that they recommend, because I don't trust the company's recommendation. I think it's like they say 7 years, which is ridiculous, because if you blow out a heat exchanger, you're talking on a Yanmar, for a 4-cylinder engine, it's somewhere between $7,000 and $12,000. That's a lot of money, and it's a complete fucking rip-off, if you ask me. But they have a monopoly, and generally they're pretty reliable engines. But yeah, you have to really spend a lot of time maintaining these things and getting to know them, because there's a lot of expensive parts. Whereas a portable generator, if it shits itself, you can replace it for smaller cost than an inboard, a lot smaller cost. But they are a little bit noisier. An inboard diesel generator is very quiet. It's generally in a little enclosure. It's water cooled, so heating is not a problem. And you hardly even know it's running. Like, it's just a little puff coming out the back of the boat. It's plugging away. It's probably producing 50 to 100 amps an hour, because its only job is to turn an alternator. Or a little generator, and they do a very good job. So, but yeah, I don't have room to put one on my boat, or if I did, it would take up storage somewhere I want it, storage. And the downside of a normal portable generator is they are noisy. You do get fumes, or you get more fumes than an inboard, I think. And those fumes are dangerous. They're petrol fumes. So, and you've also got petrol. Typically they're running on petrol. I haven't seen any portable diesel generators that are a small size. So yeah, that's my take. I hope you found that interesting. I hope if you're looking at generators, you give it a fair consideration. Don't buy the cheapest generator. You will certainly regret it. Do lots of research, look at all the reviews, talk to different yachties, see how they go. I strongly recommend the Honda 2.5. I think it's fantastic. It works like a beast. You can treat it really poorly and it will keep working. The GT 2500 that I have, I do recommend it. I think it's a great generator. It's less robust than the Honda, a little bit more temperamental, but still represents good value for money at the moment. This is my 12-month review. Anyway, have a great day, safe sailing, I'll see you out there somewhere.